Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us in person and on live stream. My name is Sangeeta Patel. I am the PTSA past president. At this time, I'd like to welcome all of our candidates to our PTSA Brighton Meet the Candidates Board of Education event. At this time, I'd like to turn the evening over to our moderator, Sherry Johnson, who is the Executive Director of the Monroe County School Board Association. Hope I got that right.
You did perfect. Thank you, Sangeeta. Good evening, everyone. I'd also like to welcome all of you to the Brighton Meet the Candidate Night. And I do want to thank the Brighton PTSA for their work in getting this set up, and the Brighton Technology team for their supporting effort in getting this out to the community. Providing community residents the opportunity to meet and listen to the viewpoints of the candidates that are asking to serve as elected board trustees is key to participating in our democratic process as an informed voter. Before we ask the candidates to introduce themselves and give their opening statements, I would like to speak to the work of elected officials, board trustees. As said in the title, Board of Education members hold the public trust. While they are locally elected officials, those in our suburban districts are nonpartisan and unpaid. These elected volunteers will need to devote hundreds of hours during their term to learn about their roles and responsibilities. And they must also make sure that they are available to their community by serving on district committees, attending and participating in district functions and events. So I want to thank all of these candidates for making the commitment to pursuing this important avenue of service to the students, our community, and public education. So let's get introduced to the candidates who are seeking to serve in this important role for the Brighton community. And in ballot order, I'm going to introduce Ms. Karen Hatch, Ms. Sandra Tindale Carl, Ms. Melaney Bernhardt, Mr. Peter Wegman, and Ms. Eleanor Haruko Oi. To the candidates, you will be provided 3 minutes for an opening statement and 3 minutes for a closing statement, and they will both be done in ballot order. The community questions will be rotated through so that each of you will have the opportunity to answer a question first. You have 2 minutes to answer those questions. And so please watch for the time. A yellow card will let you know when 20 seconds are left. And so please start closing your answer down, and a red card will let you know when time is up, and we'll try to wave those your way. I am happy to repeat any question. So if you need that, by the time you get through the order, you may not have heard it completely or remember it completely. I'm happy to do that. So let's begin with opening statements. Karen.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Karen Hatch, and I've served as a member of the Board of Education for 7 years. I was born and raised in Monroe County. I'm a proud graduate of West Arundecoit Schools, and I've lived in Brighton for 15 years. My husband and I bought a house here because we were determined to send our kids to a public school. We're both products of public schools. We have 3 children. Our daughter Lizzie is a sophomore at Brown University. Our son Teddy is a senior. He's headed to Embry-Riddle in the fall. And this is where everybody laughs, so go ahead. Our daughter Peggy is 5, and she'll start kindergarten in the fall. It never gets as big a chuckle on this evening as I think it's going to. I don't know, you guys. I've been involved in one way or another in schools on behalf of kids and families for the majority of my adult life. I have training as a special educator. I've worked both in a residential treatment center and in a public school setting, and as my kids started school and I was staying home to raise them, I began to volunteer. In Brighton, you have a lot of opportunities to be present in our schools, and that runs the gamut from working the bake sale to sitting on interview committees. And I took advantage of all of those opportunities. So I've served as a parent volunteer, I've served as a parent leader in the PTSA, and then finally on the Board of Education for 2 terms plus 1 year. I'm running again because, quite simply, I love the work. Education has always been my wheelhouse. Schools have always been my happy place. So I've spent a long time putting together all of those interests into board service. I'm interested in teaching and learning and curriculum development. I'm interested in the politics in Albany and how policy affects how we run our public schools. We have local control, but we don't at the same time. And I'm very interested in how budgets and fiscal responsibility towards our community affect our ability to have the programs and to run the schools that our families want, that our kids need, and that is a good place for our community to center around. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Sandra.
Good evening. My name is Sandra Carl. I'm a proud Brighton graduate and have been a Brighton resident for 48 years. My husband Steve and I have 4 boys. James was the class of 2018. Jack was class of 2020. They're both at the University of Rochester. TJ will graduate this year and head off to Vassar, and Teddy is the class of 2029. So I will have had a child in this district that I love from 2005 to 2029. I am running for election to the Board of Education because I believe in our district and want to bring new perspectives and ideas to our schools. I value our diversity and academic standards. I would look forward to celebrating all that we do well and also being a part of the conversations that encourage academic excellence, make every child feel comfortable and safe, and maintain fiscal responsibility. The pandemic has caused a strain on our families, teachers, and staff with regards to academic learning and individual wellness. As we enter the post-pandemic phase, I want to help ensure that our students and staff are supported and have the resources that they need. While my greatest experience for this board position comes from being a mom of 4 busy boys, I am also an LPGA golf professional with experience in both the private and public sectors. I founded the First Tee of Rochester, New York, which is a student-centered approach to teaching children that includes golf skills and life skills. I've worked closely with governmental agencies like the Monroe County Legislature, petitioned for grants, and operated a business. In our schools, I have served as the building chair of both Council Rock and French Road. I've chaired PTSA events, was a Brighton football booster parent for 4 years, president for 4 years, and I've been a consistent volunteer through my children's journey. However, where I learned the most is from my children and their friends sitting around my kitchen table, just talking. They share how they think things are going in particular classes. They talk about social issues. They talk about their singing groups. They talk about their coaches and how their fellow students are doing. And what a gift it is to just listen. A particular conversation with a parent at a lacrosse field about how her child is now struggling with anxiety since COVID sparked me into action to run for this school board, so I can support and help students and families. I want to listen, I want to get creative, I want to come up with solutions that work and make everyone feel comfortable. I want to be responsive to the values, beliefs, and priorities of everyone in the community. I'm certainly proud to be part of this community, and I would be honored to serve on the Board of Education. I'm grateful for my Brighton experience and the education my children are receiving. If elected, my goal would be to ensure that current and future students have those same opportunities for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Melaney.
Hi, I'm Melaney Bernhardt. I've been in the district for 25 years, originally from Webster Penfield, so I've been in the Monroe County school system for quite a while. I chose to live in Brighton mostly because it was central, but also because of the reputation of the school. It had an amazing reputation. Basically, people said it's like going to private school, but you're in a public school district. So I thought it was great. I love the old-fashioned neighborhoods, the street parties, the picnics, the parades. It's like everybody used to say you live in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, you know, and I felt like I really did. Everybody knows their neighbors. The sense of community was really great, and that's what I really loved about it. I have a senior, well, actually, I go with my daughter who graduated in 2020, so she's a recent graduate. My son is a senior currently, and he is enlisted in the United States Army, and I'm very proud of that. So he ships out on June 28th, so very excited about that. My youngest son is a freshman, and he is enjoying the high school very much. He has a great group of friends, and he's been joined the wrestling team this year for the first time and excelled at it. So he's having a great time with wrestling. I've been very active when the children were younger in the Brighton schools. I was a broom parent. I ran a program called Tasty Tuesdays. I'm very interested in public health and nutrition. I actually taught at Brighton Continuing Ed, some classes there too. And I also, let's see, I was Festival of Ideas, one of my favorite programs. I think I've been a volunteer for over 12 years. And I volunteer the whole day when I go because I think it's the best program out there and I'm very proud of it. I like to promote that. I've also carpooled many times. My daughter was on crew. My son played football, baseball. all sorts of sports, so it was all over the community. Was even on the chain game for football. Had a great time doing that. The reason I decided to run for school board is I was so happy with the community, but I started to see a shift the last few years, and I felt like I just didn't see the focus back to our core basics of really good academics. And I just felt things were getting a little lost, so I started to come, and then when COVID happened, a lot of things I was very uncomfortable with, so I started coming to board meetings, and I was speaking for a voice of parents that I didn't feel were being represented, so I thought I would run for school board because I want to make more of a difference. I'll admit I don't know much how the school board runs, but I intend to learn. I'm great at picking up things quickly, and I hope to make a difference.
Thank you. Peter.
I'm a teacher. I may have over-prepared. Good evening. Thank you to the Brighton PTSA for hosting this event. Sherry Johnson for moderating, and of course to all the other candidates up here. In the spring of 1987, I was sitting in Mrs. Lipson's AP Euro class as she gave us a pep talk about going into the world after Brighton High School. She talked about truth. She explained that when we go into the world, regardless of what we do, we should speak truth to power, truth to community, and truth to ourselves. Didn't quite understand it at the time, but a good lesson many times resonates with students as they age. They eventually have the wisdom to understand it. The truth is our district is one of the top 100 school districts in New York State with talented teachers, a historically strong academic program, and successful sports teams. Throughout the pandemic, Brighton teachers and administrators worked tirelessly to shift to virtual learning platforms, a hybrid learning model, and eventually back to full school days. Mental health issues existed pre-COVID, and now, like most districts in the U.S., they're at what is likely an all-time high. I support education for all staff around mental health and funds towards more counselors to support our students' needs. I support special education in the district. While Brighton Special Education has dedicated teachers and administrators, the truth is more can be done to help our students. Things such as hiring more special education teachers, arranging release times so special ed teachers can do mandated paperwork along with fielding questions from parents, training for general education teachers so they can have a better understanding of the special needs student in front of them, and training for staff as well, because teachers are not the only people students interact with throughout the day. This would help expand support, empathy, and understanding in our school community for our special education students. I support Brighton's mission and vision plan. I do believe that there is integrity in our district in supporting every child. One of the ways that I believe we can support our students is to eradicate bullying. Our administrators work hard to solve problems. However, we need more of our students to learn how to stand up for each other and rally around what is right and what is kind, especially in our middle school. As a district, we need to take a hard look at this issue and find solutions to build a positive community. Our students will feel better about coming to school. We will therefore be better learners. Brighton needs to continue to make changes in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to continue to hire teachers of color as well as those with diverse cultural backgrounds that are representative of our student body. I support continued training for administrators, teachers, and staff around sensitivity to diversity and inclusiveness. These are all ways Brighton can support every student and build a stronger learning community in the process. In order to maintain the excellence Brighton is known for and to move forward, we need to maintain our district funding locally and from the state. I believe that I can bring the various stakeholders together, parents, community, and the district to create a budget that meets everyone's needs or concerns. Circling back to Mrs. Lipson's message of truth, I am the only candidate on the ballot that works in education, teaches in a classroom, runs education program, and works with accelerated students, as well as special needs students. The truth is, I've been a teacher for 23 years, lived in Brighton for 29, and I currently have children in the Brighton district. I know the areas of strength and areas for improvement in Brighton. Together we can secure and use our district funding in a way that supports what we have and what we can become in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And Eleanor.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I did want to give a special thank you to Sangeeta Patel because I was supposed to be sitting over there moderating, but I had to pitch in at the last minute as I decided to run, and so thank you so much for being here. 2 years ago, I did choose to run for the school board, and I've chosen to run again. I'm very happy to say that this year I won't be Zoom bombed during my opening remarks, which is lovely to have happen tonight. But my name is Eleanor Haruko Oi. I've been a Brighton resident since 1979, and I graduated in 1991 along with, well, very close. My sister graduated with you in the same year in '89. I have left Rochester briefly to go to college and graduate school, but otherwise I've moved back here, and basically Brighton has been my home for the majority of my life. I have 2 children, a daughter who's graduating and heading off to Alfred University next year to study arts, and then my youngest is in 10th grade and happily doing tech crew and things like that right now this evening. Currently, I have chosen to run for the school board because of all of that I have seen, is that going through COVID is that it reminded me a lot about what's most important in my life. And so I reinvigorated my volunteer efforts over the last couple of years, as I have been a volunteer throughout school as much as I can as a working parent, doing in schools, going to things like the bake sales and contributing and all of those pieces. And then chose to serve as the representative to the Brighton Board of Education for the PTSA in the previous school year, and then this year I've served as the PTSA president. It has been one of my honors to really work with and be a part of Brighton more in depth. 12 years ago, I brought my daughter into Council Rock, and it just brought back all of the memories of why I loved my time here, and I wanted to see, and I've helped my children sort of go through as they have loved all of their time in Brighton, or at least a large majority of it. I have also firsthand seen the anger and hostility that has been brought to school boards across the nation. Schools have become a hotspot for the nasty politics, as they have great access to school boards in a way that is not present in a lot of other political forums. And I do want to see and help be a part of the debates. How and what we teach our children is critical to shaping the society of tomorrow. And I want to ensure that our Brighton continues to teach our children to think and to question and be that voice for change and that we want to see in the world. I have worked prior to my current position in higher education for many years, and that I have taught in leadership and student development throughout my life. Currently, I work for the Contact Tracing Initiative, and I have seen firsthand how COVID has impacted our society. So it would be my honor to serve Brighton and to serve in the school board position. Thank you.
Thank you all. We are going to now go to the community questions, and again, we'll start with the ballot order for the first question. The question is, what do you believe is the most important priority for the board as a whole, and how will you work to achieve that priority?
This is an easy answer for me. The most important priority of the board as a whole is kids. Right? We're here to serve students. The institution of a public school exists to educate kids. And every decision we make, everything that we do, needs to be done through that lens. So how we decide to spend our money, how we decide to craft our curriculum, how we move resources to meet New York State standards, all of that is about kids. So if you keep that as your lens, your priorities fall into place pretty easily. The biggest priority we have for the community, looking through the lens of how we're going to serve our students, is how we craft our spending plan. Right? That's the biggest impact on the community, especially the community at large, who is no longer sending children to school here or won't be sending children to school here. We understand that your school taxes can be a burden. They play a role in how you craft your personal finances. We know that it costs more money every year to run your own household, and we see those pressures here as well. So crafting the spending plan that both works for the community and works for kids is really the biggest job that we do. Thanks.
Thank you. Sandra, same question.
Thank you. It's tricky because each family will perceive a priority differently. So what I like and what we do, and I would like to be a part of, is the blueprint that brings our district together and encompasses all of the priorities. I think it's a really key initiative of our board. It's a collection of the priorities that I believe our district has formed, both taking into finances, taking into the emotional, and prioritizing the academic. It expresses what we think the district needs. I had the privilege of sitting on the Blueprint Committee, and I think it really brought many different families with different thoughts and different children that needed different things together. And we could think short term, but we could also think long term of how can we shape our district. So I think if the priority of the board remains on the blueprint, I think we have a solid future.
Thank you. Melaney.
I agree a lot with Karen. I believe children are obviously the top priority, and what I'd like to see accomplished with the board is more involvement from the community, more involvement from parents, giving them a voice at the table, and maybe we have forums outside the board so we can get more input for making decisions. I do anticipate, some financial stress coming up for a lot of people, and I'd like to be aware of that and how do we deal with that. And I know we're still dealing with the repercussions of COVID, and I would like to understand and work together on how do we address those anxiety issues that have come up and the mental health issues that have arrived because of that and how things were handled. And also the students, I feel like the last 2 years, their learning has significantly been impacted, and I'd like to get a real true feel on how each family was impacted by that, and see what we can do to bridge that gap of what happened.
Thank you. And Peter?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. What do you believe is the most important priority for the board as a whole, and how will you work to achieve this priority?
I think as of right now, what the board is facing probably for the next 2 to 3 years is a fiscal component. Now, as I say that, as a teacher, students always come first, period. I was actually late to teaching, believe it or not. My mother was a teacher. My sister was a longtime teacher here in the district. I actually worked in healthcare for some time before becoming a teacher. And one of the things I finished in healthcare was working as a regional manager for billing and collections for Pharmacy Corp of America with an AR of about 20 million. And I didn't find it as rewarding as the history degree that I had and went back for teaching. So when I got into education, one of the things that struck me was sometimes people would approach the financial side as, well, we're not a business. Well, we're not, first of all. We teach students, but those students have teachers in the classroom, equipment, they have the specialized teachers and whatnot. All of that is coming from a fiscal piece that needs to be acknowledged. And we can't just kind of say, that's not what we do. So for Students First right now, the federal government and the state government has given us a considerable amount of COVID money to essentially make it through the pandemic, which we've used, I think, rather well. But by virtue of that fact, the extra staff, the extra financial piece that we brought on has to be considered, and we, in a manner of speaking, as that money recedes, we need to make sure that we still have the money in place to continue with those staff members who've helped us out with mental health, special education, general education, and some of the other needs that we have, so that the district remains fiscally strong in that respect, and in turn, the students have exactly what they need in order to be successful in the classroom and be successful in their daily life and on the way to graduation. So again, students first, but initially it's dealing with that COVID money and its absence someday.
Thank you. Eleanor?
Reiterating in terms of, I think the most important priority is the finances and how that does impact, because as I learned doing my MBA, how you spend your money shows what you place importance on. And that is the bottom line. And I do think it should be students first, and that this is looking at, again, similar to what some of the previous candidates have said, how as we come out of COVID, are we reallocating those dollars and where are we placing those importance? And to get to some of more of the heart of the answer, I do think the importance should be placed on mental health and DEI work, equity and inclusion, and helping our students feel safe and comfortable wherever they are with being who they are, and helping them to find their way to being comfortable with who they are matters. And that we should be able to help create those budgets to to find ways to further enhance our students, to find that place where they belong, and that Brighton matters to them, and that they feel that who is there makes them feel belong, as a place of belonging.
Thank you. So the next question, Sandra, you'll get first. And I'm going to switch the order simply because you brought up mental health, and that was one of the questions. And the question is, what is your position on the need for mental health supports for our schools? And is the current funding commensurate with the need?
Repeat that last part, please.
Yeah. Is the current funding, the funding that's already in place, is that commensurate with the need for mental health services? What's your position on that?
Okay. I think it needs to increase. My real concern is coming out of COVID and the mental health and the anxiety and the fatigue and the mental wellness that parents are referencing and children are referencing puts each child at a different place academically. So I think we have to first tackle the mental health piece by having more groups where people can feel comfortable and talk about what's going on with them, so they can express themselves and be around people that make them feel like they belong. I feel like our counselors do an excellent job, and I think we need more of them. I think it would be a nice piece if a teacher could take on a smaller, targeted groups as we progress, which would include more funding.
Thank you. Melaney?
I'd have to agree that we do need more services for mental health, but I would still want to balance with, I kind of really want to look at the whole budget and understand where we might be able to transfer funds from, so that not just constantly adding more for services. Maybe there's an area we can reduce to get the services our children need. I do think the idea of more groups and getting children to build more community. Unfortunately, through COVID, they were on social media and electronic devices extensively and built some really bad habits. And I'd like to see programs that help get the kids back to talking face to face and not so much screen time. And that's where I would love to see an effort made, just besides, group discussion with mental health professionals. I'd like to see more interaction, physical interaction, face to face. And I think that's important.
Thank you. Peter?
Mental health is a big issue in the school that I teach at. I certainly know from my daughter and my son who go to Brighton that post-COVID there are considerable issues surrounding it. Because we are a school district that has a number of high-achieving students, even before COVID, many times they would put a lot of stresses on themselves in order to achieve that A, that score, whatever they were looking for. By virtue of that fact, I think counselors do an incredible job. They're a jack of all trades when you really look at what their day is. From providing basic school counseling, college counseling, to severe issues where a student walks in with a family issue or a drug problem or something, and then you just kind of have to clear the decks for that person. So some extra counselors certainly would help. Another school psychologist perhaps, and maybe even considering, and I think this is something that schools struggle with in general, how many are enough, if you will, because you can have too many in some areas. But perhaps creating a different tier of counseling. You have counselors that are dealing with the day-to-day issues, but some of the students that have severe problems, they're not chronic, but they're going to take a while to sort out. You have a second group that a student can meet with. And then, of course, matching that student with the help of their family to counselors in the community or other healthcare professionals that can take them the steps further that they need to do. Because that actually is, I want to be careful saying it's not the job of the school, but it's not one that the school has to do alone. There's other organizations in the community that can help with that as well. And we need to be partnering with them, or at least counselors need to know how to access them so that they can pass that information on to the parents so they can make an informed decision for their child.
Thank you. Eleanor?
The mental health crisis in our nation is real, in terms of that everyone I have talked to who works in counseling, who works as a psychologist or a psychiatrist, has a full caseload and could take another 100 patients if they had the ability to. The caseloads in our school are too high, and I would love to see the mental health counseling, the mental health budgets be increased. Again, with trying to figure out where are we taking away from, because it is. I've asked my children and to share their own story. Both of them are diagnosed with anxiety and depression and have been through many, many iterations of this. And the fight for me to even try and get them the help they need in the private sector has been a challenge. And I know in school they have an amazing counselor who has bent over backwards and helped them through all of this time. I also know her caseload is enormous, and that asking her to do things, I always feel bad because I know how many other requests in the hundreds she's getting in a day, and yet she still gets back to me on email every single day, and that's wonderful. But they do need help, but I know that also this help is needed across the nation right now. COVID has hit our world hard, and especially in the mental health arena. And it's not as easy to find, it's not as easy to fix something. We have done a lot of research how to fix a broken leg. We can't quite figure out as easily how to get people back to happiness and contentment. And it's gonna take time.
Thank you. And Karen?
Thanks. So the mental health crisis was an important an important part of how our counselors navigated with students before COVID, right? So as the candidates have pointed out, this brought things to a head. For a couple of years, the Monroe County School Boards Association, with whom I'm lucky to work on the legislative committee with, has advocated that Albany have a dedicated line of funding for mental health and social and emotional learning in schools. We hear a lot of folks in Albany talk about how schools need to do more, and we are working towards full funding of the foundation aid formula, but we know that even that's not enough. So that's the kind of work that I would continue if I were able to continue working with the legislative committee with the Monroe County School Boards Association. This isn't something that we can continue to carve out of our budgets at the rates that students and families need the assistance. We do already work, we have a family support coordinator who helps our families coordinate with outside agencies, but that job could take 3 people, right, if we could hire for that. So I think that line of funding, there's work to be done both in Albany and at the federal level. I would love to see some of the lines of funding coming out of COVID stay with us. We know that they're not. We're already working towards being able to integrate those positions into our budget so that there's not a fiscal cliff as that funding comes to an end. But those are the two things that I would focus on when looking for funding.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next question, Melaney, you get this one first, and it is, would you recommend changes to the current academic program? And if you would, what would those be and why?
Some changes I would definitely like to see, based on just my own children, is a little more emphasis on the other programs the school offers for those that are not college-bound, like EMCC, with the experience with the trades, the military, our service personnel, police, fire, EMTs. And I would like that exposure earlier for children. I would like to see that at the middle school level. I feel like my children and a lot of other children would have benefited. And again, that helps with that emotional anxiety piece that students have, because some of them are just not that classroom learner, they're more hands-on. And Brighton's great with academics. They have fabulous different programs, which I love. Principles of Engineering, the finance class is fantastic. I actually think that should be mandatory. I think I need to see more life skills being taught to these students, and I think that gives them a sense of empowerment and strength in their own selves and what they can do and can't do. It's just nice to be able to see different things offered like that. And I like the emphasis back on a lot of the core classes, the math, social studies, science. That's what I would like to see. And I think that was it. Yeah. That's it.
Thank you. Peter, you get this one second.
To be honest, it wouldn't change anything. The program right now is working. It's working very well. There may be tweaks that may be able to made, but I wouldn't make any large changes. For example, in accelerated courses, I might suggest adding some. Right now, AP, and it's a standard for a lot of schools around the country and a very important one. I do a lot of work with AP. I teach AP students. In a few short weeks, I'll be going to Kansas City and I'll be correcting AP exams and training 2,000 people to do it in the process. It's a high stakes test. Kids work very hard for a test that will take in one day for 3 hours. And if they mess it up, they're done. One of the considerations is dual credit courses through, for example, MCC. That's a program that starts in September, ends in June. The students have a body of work they do through the whole program, and at the end they get college credit. If they have a bad day, the other work makes up the difference, which means they don't lose the credit and they still have that accelerated rating, if you will. They have something to use at the end. So that's something I might suggest. I think special ed programming, as I mentioned before, needs some work. Some additions can be made. And I think that's something that we should take a hard look at as far as making adjustments to. But again, not necessarily making wholesale change. And I would actually agree too that students aren't encouraged enough for the trades. I can remember over the years teaching seniors on and off, and occasionally students would say, oh, I wouldn't go into welding, or I wouldn't go into being an electrician or a plumber. My current plumber is actually a student I taught many years ago. But what I pointed out to some of those kids is I said, you realize you're sitting next to kids whose parents own construction companies, and they started out as plumbers and electricians and whatnot. They started out in the trades. They eventually got perhaps a business degree and opened their own company. It's not a bad pathway to success either. It's not for everybody, but it's not a bad pathway. Thank you.
Thank you. Eleanor?
Can you repeat the question? I just wanted.
Absolutely. Would you recommend changes to the current academic program? And if so, what would those changes be and why?
Academic program, I'm going to bring it. I believe that we need to do more in teaching critical race theory. I do believe that it expands the history that is taught. This is not teaching. History was written by people who won. And if we do not learn from the history that we have, we're doomed to repeat it. We need to expand the way history is taught, the way all of our coursework is taught in general, because it is sometimes from a framework that has historically been very male-centric and also very white-centric. And that is what our school books have been. I believe Brighton is doing a good job with this, but I believe there's always room for improvement in terms of that for academics. It is academic adjacent. I do feel very strongly about civic engagement and volunteering and getting out into the community and learning about the community that they live in, but also the community that is the city of Rochester that we come from, and where our people come from and what are their stories, and what are the stories of the people who have lived and founded and created Rochester. So those are some of the changes that I might suggest in terms of curriculum. But again, I would want to sort of, again, look at how it all is balanced with everything else.
Thank you. Karen?
You know, I find this an interesting question as I sit here and think about it, because in some ways it assumes that our curriculum is, and our academic programming is currently static, and it's not. This is work that's constantly changing and moving forward. I've been privileged to work with the Curriculum Council for the past 7 years, alongside teachers and parents and community members, as we think deeply about teaching and learning. And so a great deal of our academic programming is actually, it's not set by New York State, but it's dictated by New York State. We work with the Regents programs. Our students will take certain exams. We follow New York State standards. But we work within that framework to constantly make sure that we're giving students what they need, and then also what they want in terms of our elective programs. But one of the things that I have loved watching through the years, thinking about this idea that our academic programming is static or not static, the way we think about teaching and learning has changed enormously from the time Lizzie started kindergarten in 2007 until 15 years later, her younger brother is going to graduate. When we were in school, we were given tasks and we learned skills and we were given information to memorize. And kids, I think, spend a lot more time these days making meaning. And I think that there are more opportunities every year for teachers to understand how to meet kids where they are, to use those skills, to apply those facts, to make meaning. And I wouldn't change the path we're on right now, especially as New York State is moving towards applying the culturally relevant sustaining education framework that the Board of Regents called to action, nominated in 2021, but we continue moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sandra?
Thank you. You know, I have a lot to learn here. But what dawns on me as watching my kids, you know, now exit high school and start at the U of R is that, for the most part, they were really well prepared, both from an academic standpoint and from a rigor standpoint. However, I think now that we are exiting COVID, I would like to see the rigor of our academic progress. I would like to see it increase. I would like us to be able to find, and again, meet every child where they are and push them to the next level of finding out academically where they are and how can we get whatever level that is. AP classes, that's fine, let's push it a little more. They're reading, okay, how can we push that a little bit more? And I do know that parents want to be involved to a large degree. So I think if we could involve the parents in that process, I think that would be great. I would like to see also the partnership with EMCC and the different classes that are offered there are fantastic. We had one friend that went on to become a welder right out of high school, and fantastic and doing great. I would also like our academics, and I know this is talked about with my 5th grader, but I love it, and she always talks with him about not what to think, but how to think. And I think that's a classic phrase that could be used even at the high school level, and perhaps it is. But it really speaks to me and brings them again to that next level of education that I would be looking for.
Thank you. And since you brought up some of the curriculum and development piece, I'm going to ask this question next. And Peter, you get this one first. What is the role of the Board of Education in curriculum development and implementation? Or what do you believe is the role of the board in curriculum development and implementation?
I think the role is to trust your staff, to trust your teachers, to trust your administrators, to trust your superintendent. Not blind trust, but these are the people who are trained to do the job. You know, every teacher in the district has a master's degree in education. Every administrator either has a master's degree in education or administration, sometimes both. The point is they're the ones that are trained to do the job. We need to be aware of the curriculum. We need to be aware of what's going on. We need to make sure that the tools are available to the teachers to implement that curriculum. We need to make sure that there are teachers on staff and administrators on staff that can also implement that curriculum and guide the teachers who are teaching it if they need that help. So that's really our role. And then as state or federal guidelines come down, obviously we are part of that process, is sifting through it. We take care of what we need to do, and I want to be careful of saying we pass it on, but everybody has a role in a district to perform. And as a board, we can't perform the entire role. We are part of a larger team. So we pass that on so that it can be dealt with the way it needs to be dealt with. And I think some boards, you know, as I look at them around the nation, don't always do that. They want to have a hand in everything. So I really think it's our job to hire the right people, trust them to do the job, and make sure they have what they need, and make sure we take care of what we need to do at our level as federal and state guidelines come down.
Thank you. Eleanor, same question.
Similar to that in terms of that I feel that it is something that should be delegated to the superintendent as well as the administrators and the teachers, but with the ability of the board to question those decisions that are made. And that, again, it is learning more, it is helping, but the board is elected to guide and to delegate and to question. And that is where I think that I agree in terms of that they are the experts. They have those degrees and they have this. But also as board members, is we do have children in school and we can sort of say, hey, this is something of what we have heard happen, which may not always be with some of the administrators. And it's those questions and just giving that feedback. And being a board member that is accessible to other parents so that they can share their feedback and their opinions and perspectives on what is happening, so we can help question and guide some of the decisions that are made by the superintendents and the administrators, principals and teachers in the classrooms. But they are the experts. They should be that.
Thank you. And Karen?
The board and the superintendent work together to set the vision for the school district, and then, like my fellow candidates have said, we trust the experts to implement it. We provide the resources that they need to implement it, but it's their job to do the work, and it's our job to make sure that they have what they need. It is our job to make sure that we are using the lens that the community is looking for, and also that it meets New York State standards, and that we're upholding regulations, but ultimately it's the professionals that do the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you. I see it as a partnership with the New York State Department of Education, where our board would set our local guidelines, taking into effect what their curriculum plan is, and then turning it over to the experts and letting our teachers run with it and get creative and excite our students to bring some energy and some life to what was really set really far away in Albany. So to bring it local, let it come alive, let our kids have fun, and then I think it's the responsibility of our board to ask questions. You know, parents, what do you think? Students, what do you think? teachers, how's it going? And then to play back and forth, you know, to make sure that it's successful.
Thank you. Melaney?
For this one, I'm going to say the trust the experts. I would like to be on a board that questions the experts. Trust your teachers, maybe get the input from the teachers, but sometimes it's being pushed down from the state. Where's the checks and balances? Who's really looking at the curriculum that they're putting out there? And is there other alternative curriculums that we should also be evaluating besides just what the state says? I know we have to work with the state, but I would like to see some people push back occasionally. The state and the federal government, I feel, have gotten too involved in our education, and we need to bring it back to local community and what works for our community and what works for our town. And I would like to see a board stand up a little bit to what's going on and ask more questions. Thank you.
All right, now speaking of asking questions, the next one, Eleanor, you get this one first. And it is, how would you handle a request to remove a book from the district shelves?
Say no. Sorry, I don't want to make that lately. Why is this book being asked to be removed? What is the content of the book? I truly do believe in freedom of speech and that one should be able to learn from any book that is out there. It's funny, I know someone who works in publishing, and they say the best way to get a book on a bestseller list is to have it banned somewhere, which I find amusing as heck, but also probably very true. Why is a book being removed? And I personally right now can't fathom why that would be. If it is something that someone else finds hurtful, what can we learn from that hurt? Why are you finding that hurt in that book, and what is it bringing to you, and why have you been asking to remove it? So my short answer is no, and I know that's a little bit flippant, but at the same time it is something of where we can learn from this, and we shouldn't be removing something that someone has deemed to be publishable.
Thank you. Karen?
Sure. This is something that we've dealt with as a district. A couple of years ago, maybe 2017, we had a family ask that we remove a book from the English 11 curriculum. You know, and again, this is a matter where a teacher undertook a lot of effort to write a unit and choose what they thought was an appropriate resource for it. The board did decide to read the book, but ultimately decided that we trusted the professional who chose it, her reasons for doing so, and how it met the needs of the curriculum and the needs of students. At the same time, we have always worked with families to say, if this is truly uncomfortable for your family, for your student, that we have an alternative. There are always different ways to meet the goals of a lesson, and we'll do that where and when we need to. And in the same vein, when we've been approached to say, I don't really like this book in the library, we have looked to input from our librarians, who are the professionals hired to curate that collection and the library curriculum. We have trusted that they've made the right decision for the developmental decision for the level of students in that building. And again, we have said to parents, if this is something you don't want your kid to have access to, we can do that. But we're not going to do that for all kids. This might not be right for your family, but it's right for other kids, and it's important for other kids to see themselves represented in the materials that we have in our schools.
Thank you. Sandra, same question.
I agree. I believe removing a book, I think it restricts some freedom of thought. I think it restricts idea exchange. My focus would rather turn to making sure that our books are age appropriate, and that if our families do have an issue, that then they have a process that they can go through to say to the librarian, not for my kid, to the teacher, to the administration, whomever they need to speak to, so that if for some reason and that book is not appropriate for that family, that there are other things, other books and other content where maybe that same lesson can be taught in a different way. I have seen where parents have given feedback for and against the exact same book. You know, one of my friends will say that book was great, that book, and someone else, you know, really didn't like it. So I think it's a very fine line. I think it needs to be respected. And I would welcome parent involvement along that lines to make sure that the material is working for their family.
Thank you. Melaney.
Say a lot about the same thing Sandra said. I think it comes down to family, what they value, and what they deem appropriate for their children. I don't think the school has a right to just say everybody's reading this. I'm glad that they do have options in there, that you have an opportunity to look at the book first and decide if it's appropriate for your family and your values and religion, whatever else. Still get the wrong camera, sorry. What your family values. So if there is a book, they can go to the library and get the book at the public library, but in the school, I think it needs to be up to the parents to review, and I'd love to see all the book lists always handed out for every class. I don't like when it's a surprise. I think everybody should know ahead of time what is being taught in your classrooms. But again, I think it's parental choice.
Thank you. And Peter.
I don't think I'm going to give an answer that's very different than anyone else. I think it's a very big deal to remove a book from a library. I think if a parent was to approach me, I would take the time to listen, because they took the time to see me, to talk to me, so they should have an opportunity to be heard. And I've found that, and again, years ago I mentioned working in healthcare. I started out working at Strong, mopping floors, and then I was a secretary. And as a secretary, many times I was the first person to receive the irate individual for whatever reason. I take the time to listen to what their story is, try and get a full understanding of what's going on, and then I would ask them about the process. Have you talked to the teacher? Have you talked to the principal before you got to me? If they hadn't, I would encourage them to go in that direction, and then I would follow up to make sure that everything was taken care of appropriately, or what have you. If it came to the board level, I think, you know, Karen's idea of reading the book and getting a sense of it all and working the process from there is the most appropriate course of action. But a knee-jerk reaction should not be to remove a book from a library. Maybe find an alternative book for the student to read if it truly is a problem for the family, which quite frankly isn't an issue in teaching. Many times you can find age-appropriate books that have a similar message, although may not be by that author, and the world does not come to the end for that student. They're able to accomplish what they need to accomplish, and the rest of the class accomplishes what they need to.
Thank you. That puts us back to the top of the ballot order. And this question is, how would you work to increase communication channels for those who either no longer have students in school or who might be new to the district or simply don't have access to online options?
This is always a conundrum, isn't it? This is some part of the work that we do every day. We know that we're not reaching every family. We know we're not reaching every resident. We try so hard. With our communications go out via so many different channels. We have forums. We have opportunities for folks to talk to us all the time, to reach out to us privately, to come to our meetings. To be honest, I wish I knew the answer to this. I flubbed this question the last time I did this in 2019, and I have not magically solved this issue. So I'm looking forward to actually what the other candidates have to say. Frankly, I would love to see every community member actively engaged in what our schools are doing. That would make such a huge difference to how we plan, how we communicate, how we build relationships. But I think that part is key, is taking every opportunity we have to build relationships. And it's interesting, as a board member, we do depend on the school staff for the most part to deliver the message. So at budget time, it's Dr. McGowan who goes out into the community and talks to Rotary to deliver the spending plan to residents who don't have kids in the district, or to go to the St. John's home. But at every opportunity we have to build relationships, whether that's in the aisle in Wegmans or it's at a formal event. That's an opportunity for folks to say, I should maybe look into what's happening at the school. So take it away, friends. Tell me, how do we do this?
Wow. Sandra, same question.
I can actually completely comprehend why that is such a complex issue. And I think, my thoughts go to old-fashioned, in-person, and snail mail, as my kids call it. I think that is a place where we can still print something, send it, hope they read it, and then in person. And if that means, meeting at our neighborhood block parties and having a member of our school board there and explaining all of the good things that we have going on and asking some of the questions about things that our board is challenged by. People do, I think, for the most part, want to participate and they want to hear, but it might not be always in the best timing. Everyone's so busy these days. So I think we're going to have to, go about it a different way, and old-fashioned might be the way to go.
Thank you. Melaney.
That is a tough one. In general, getting people more involved, it's always challenging, and a lot of people don't always use technology, so we can't totally rely on that. The snail mail is probably the way to go. And being more visible in the community, getting the board members out to more events, whether it's sporting events, potlucks, like just the street parties that Brighton's notoriously known for having, meeting at Buckland's, maybe it becomes a regular day once a month that, hey, if you have concerns or issues, kind of set something that might be a routine. We could try that. That sometimes work when people have a consistent day of the month. They know if they can show up and ask questions, that might start to build a circle of people that start to show up. So that's a suggestion I have.
Thank you. Peter.
You can repeat the question, please.
Sure. How would you work to increase communication channels for those who either no longer have students in school or might be new to the district or simply don't have access to online options?
I think right now the district is doing a good job of actually getting the message out, as I look at the number of emails in my inbox on a daily basis. Because emails are coming from the district office, emails are coming from the schools. I don't feel as if I'm not informed. I get mailings from the district. I get mailings, primarily from the district. I can go to the district website and I can find information. Occasionally there's stuff in the news. I think it's out there. As far as a board member and being able to stay in touch with the community, I think it really means showing up at events, school events, baseball games, football games. You don't have to go to every single one of them. But showing up at events like that, obviously people have an opportunity to come into the board meeting as well. Just making yourself available at times so that when people do have questions, they can ask you those questions. And I know somebody had mentioned going to nursing homes and whatnot around budget time. That's something I would actually do. I would not have an issue with that. And take the time to talk to the various constituents who hopefully will elect me.
Thank you. And Eleanor.
Yes, this is, as Karen said, the conundrum that there is no great answer to overall. I used to be director of orientation at the University of Rochester for 11 orientation cycles. Longer than anyone else had been at the university before or since. But anyway, so getting communication out is always complicated. A system that I think could be developed is having an opt-in option for community members, that they want to sign up to get Dr. Hall's Corner every Friday, if that's what it is, or, Tappan's News, it's sort of like whatever their choice is. They live in the Council Rock district, maybe they want to hear what's happening at Council Rock, just so they're aware of sort of ongoings, and if there's a field day that they know about it. That could be an option to add to some of the email, because I don't think print is the answer. And I'm just saying this from my own little bit of environmental person inside of me, that adding more paper to the world that 90% of the people are not going to read and immediately recycle, hopefully recycle, is not necessarily the answer. But I do think that potentially having that opt-in for people who do no longer have kids in school so they can get the same announcements, be on some of those things, be on the texts and phone calls that we get, the robocalls about what's happening if schools are closed and all of that. It adds to some of our ability to stay in touch with emerging and urgent situations that happen that could impact them. And that could be a great answer for some of our communities to get involved. But there is no magical answer. It's actually reading your email, which no one really likes to do because we get so much of it. So,
Thank you. We actually have time for a couple more questions, so I am going to go and forward on here. And so, Sandra, you'll get this one, and we're back to roles and responsibilities. As a board member, how would you handle a request or question or issue from a friend, neighbor, or parent regarding something that happened in their student's class or in their school?
Very carefully. You know what I would do first is I would listen. I would listen and try to figure out what the scope of the issue is. And then I would recognize that our board and our duty as a board member is not to take on individual student issues, but rather that one I would address as a friend, and I would listen and I would maybe point them in the channels that would work, starting with perhaps their teacher, then maybe to their principal, and go on from there. I would act as a liaison. I would give ideas, but I would address that more individually than I would engage my board duties.
Thank you. Melaney.
Basically the same thing. I just listen. Listen's the most important thing. People want to be heard and respect what they have to say, and then follow procedure. I'm not sure, direct them to somebody that could help them, whether it's a counselor or a teacher. And then still take the issue to the board, because I think it's important that the board is aware of what the community might be voicing their concerns. So that's what I would do.
Thank you. Peter?
If somebody brought it to my attention, I would listen. That's the first thing I would do. Again, understand the scope of it all. And the other thing to understand too is a board member, one of my students who found out I was running for board said, he's like, well, Mr. Wegman, you'll be able to hire and fire teachers. No, I don't, actually. As a board member, I can help hire and fire the superintendent, but the superintendent runs the school. So again, there is a process there. And so what would end up happening is I would talk to the parent, I would listen, I would let them know that they need to follow up with the appropriate people, as I know what the process is, and then I would follow up on my end to get a better understanding of how it came out in the wash, if you will. And if it turned into, for lack of a better term, a thing, then it might be a board discussion, but at the end of the day, it would not be necessarily settled by me alone, much less the entire board. It would be moving through a process. And I don't mean to use that word in terms of would begin in a process and die in a process, but you need to follow that so that you don't have something that's minor suddenly get out of hand because it wasn't dealt with appropriately in the first place. But I would listen and follow up, absolutely.
Thank you. Eleanor?
It's all of those things. It's listening. Are you approaching me as a friend / neighbor, or is it because I'm on the school board? What is it that you hope to get from an outcome of this conversation? And knowing that this is only one side of the story. The story is always deeper than the one side you're listening to. And that to be able to then figure out the approaches and help empower that person to see if they want to solve this on their own, or are they hoping that I might be able to be that person to advocate for them? And then sometimes talking to them and working with them of, is it appropriate for me to advocate at this time? Or is it something that we need to deal with? What is the issue and how severe is it? And just kind of really, it would depend a lot on situation. And I know that's not an answer, but it is an answer because you have to take the situation into account. And what is the best way to handle it to help the student and the parent find the answers that they're looking for? And is it just because me, Eleanor, and you just want Eleanor to listen? Or is it Eleanor, school board member, or Board of Education member?
Thank you. And Karen?
That is an important distinction to make when you're having a conversation like this. Is it me you want to talk to, or is it the school board member you want to talk to? But I think everybody hit great points here. The first thing to do is listen, because if somebody has come to you as a friend, as a neighbor, as a family member, and has something to share, then they deserve your time and they deserve your care. And then the second thing to do is to remind folks, if it's needed, that as an individual board member, I don't have power. The school board has power as a group. We don't have power in the community as individual board members. But what I do have is a lot of knowledge about who you can talk to. If it's your teacher, if it's the school administrator, if it's a counselor, if it's the superintendent or one of our assistant superintendents. And if needed, I would offer for folks, if it comes down to, would you like to talk to the superintendent, I'd be happy to make that introduction for you. And if you're comfortable, I'd be happy to sit in with you. But ultimately, the people who are going to solve the problem are the people who work for the school. And what I can provide as an individual is care. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'm just going to do one more question, and I'm going to stay with the roles and responsibilities. And Melaney, you get this one first, if I counted right. What is the school board's member, in your opinion, what is the school board's member's role and responsibility, and how does that differ from the role of the superintendent? How do you see those roles?
I think the school board holds the superintendent accountable for some of the decisions and policy that comes out from the board. The board needs to respect and value everybody's views and values, and I guess I'm really not sure how to answer that one, honestly.
Okay, no worries. Peter, same question. You want me to read it again?
No, that's okay. My role, along with every other board member, is really a steward for the district. The superintendent's role is very simple. Well, it's simple in saying it, it's not simple in actual practice, which is taking care of the day-to-day function of the school district. That is their job, that is what they do, and they have a staff to do that. The role of the board is to make sure that the superintendent is actually doing that job, because as a collective group, we hire and fire or continue with the superintendent, if you will. So it's our job to be a steward, to make sure that that is occurring the way it needs to occur. We need to make sure that the fiscal side of the school district remains afloat, so that the students have what they need. And again, it goes back to students first. Because if we're not doing that job, the students won't have teachers in their classrooms. They won't have the equipment they need, and the sports teams won't have what they need either. And then in the context of that, it's been mentioned that there are state mandates, federal mandates, and other things that need to be dealt with. It is our role to help sift through that, probably with the help of a district lawyer as well, to make sure that we are adhering to all of those mandates and the various rules, and making sure that the school district is functioning and protected in that capacity. And the list goes on.
Thank you. Eleanor.
I see the Board of Education's role very different than the superintendent's job is, as Peter said, it's the day-to-day, it's managing and making sure the school is operational, has everything they need, manages the issues that come up, which are many and varied, and to do that as a board, we are the advisors and the cheerleaders for the superintendent and the schools to say this is the great things that they're doing. And then also in private, it's the critique and education and questioning to be able to then help improve and push. But it is that sort of public-private of advising, but advising in a way that benefits the school district. But as a board member, you should be the biggest cheerleader for the school district that you're in. And this should be some of the public-facing profile, but then also knowing that you're getting the right people in that can best advise and educate and provide that perspective to learn from things that came up that may not have been handled 100% perfectly, because nobody handles everything 100% perfectly in life. That is just impossible. But that's what I feel some of the differences between board and superintendent.
Thank you. Karen.
I'm really glad to say that the difference between my responsibility and Dr. McGowan's responsibility is that he really isn't responsible for day-to-day operations, and I am not, and we are not. So both Eleanor and Peter hit that on the head. The board's role is governance, and the superintendent's job is execution. And so we do help set the vision. The superintendent is our colleague. We do supervise that individual. But we have a collegial relationship where, as Eleanor said, we problem solve, we critique each other, we talk openly and honestly, but the biggest piece is that at the beginning of every school day, the Board of Education stays home. And we listen to our kids, and we listen to our kids' friends, and they talk about their days, and people in the community come and talk to us, but we have left the superintendent in their office to do their job. That's the biggest piece. Thanks.
Thank you. Sandra?
Yeah, I think it's a real, the relationship between the school board members and the superintendent, I consider it a real checks and balance moment. Where we work together. I would just be part of a team on the school board that would support the superintendent to create, the board to create a big picture initiative with goals and steps and a blueprint to what we think should be done. Whereas the superintendent then takes that picture, brings it to life. Kids make art projects, and there's chorus concerts, and there's exams, and there's AP finals, and there's 5th grade reading. That's where the superintendent brings that big piece to life.
All right, I'm going to go to closing statements now. So we'll start at the top of the order, and 3 minutes, did I say? 3 minutes for closing statements. Karen?
I don't think it's going to take me 3 minutes. Just not going to lie. I do love the work. It's why I'm here. It's why I've stayed. It's not easy. We spend a lot of time during the year, certainly during COVID, making space for people's difficulties, their burdens, their pain. But the flip side of that is that we also get to be witness to a great deal of joy. Our buildings are places where learning comes to alive, where kids and teachers are making meaning together, and it's been my privilege to support that for the 15 years I've had kids in our public schools. I believe strongly in the potential of public schools to be at the heart of every community. We make that investment when we choose a town to live in, and I do perceive myself as a steward of your kids, of your property, and of your education system. I'm not here because someone asked me to run. I'm not here because a political party has said you should run for whatever small office you can. I'm not here because I was seeking a different job. This is the only job that I want. It's the job that I know how to do. And if the community is willing, I'd be happy to continue doing it for your kids. Thanks.
Thank you. Sandra?
I'd like to start by thanking Sangeeta Patel and the entire PTSA for hosting this event. It's harder than I thought it was going to be. I'd like to say thanks to my fellow candidates also for believing that serving on a board is an important civic responsibility. If elected, I would have the privilege of representing all community members, those with children in schools, those who do not have children in school, and those with differing perspectives. There's work to be done, and I would be honored to be part of the team that takes our schools, teachers, staff to the next level. My focus is enhancing our academic standards, looking after our students and staff's individual wellness as COVID affected all of us very differently, and taking a deep dive into our financials line by line to be sure we are doing our absolute best with our resources on behalf of all taxpayers. If elected, I would look forward to bringing new ideas and new perspectives to the table with honest, open discussions that lead us to solutions that work for all parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Melaney?
Yes, Sandra already thanked the PTSA and the other candidates coming. I'd like to thank those of you in the audience who took time out of your evening to come and watch and listen to what all of the candidates had to say, and to all of those of you watching on Zoom. Also, please thank you for showing up and taking the time to listen to what we had to say. I've been a long-time member of the community, and Brighton has been great to my children, and I'd like to continue that tradition of excellence, and I'd like to bring more community involvement, more parent involvement into the school. Also to the fiscal, the finances of the school, I'd like to drill down and understand where all the funding is going and be able to explain that to the community and get their input, especially with all the additional funds that came in from the federal government. I do truly want to understand where that went and how it was used. And I just want to be able to give back to the community because I've lived here for so long and my children have had great experiences in the school and they are successful young adults thanks to the education of Brighton. So please reach out to me if you have any questions. You can email me directly, melaneyb1@gmail.com. Thank you. And vote on May 17th.
Thank you, Peter.
I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for coming tonight, and thank you for, again, hosting this event. You know, in closing, and my remarks in this respect aren't as prepared as my first ones were. I came to teaching late. I didn't expect to be a teacher, although I've loved every minute of it. I started when I was actually volunteering with the Rhode Island Maritime Archaeology Project, and I was working with a retired biology professor from Rhode Island, University of Rhode Island, and there were some students in from Vermont helping out on the project. And apparently he liked what I was doing. He's like, you know, you have a degree in history, you seem to really enjoy this, why are you not teaching? And you know, about 3 months after that, I ended up at SUNY Oneonta getting my teaching degree on top of my history degree. And I've loved every minute of it. Then my kids were born, and that changes everything. I think of my son who was born with Tourette syndrome. He has a challenge with special education. It has challenged him his entire life. And look at what he has to navigate in school and out of school. Has been difficult at times. So for a long time, for this past year, I've been thinking maybe I should run. Maybe I can make a difference for the kids, my knowledge of education, bringing that to the table, bringing that perspective to a board that, no offense, there are no teachers on, may be helpful to the district. And I thought about it a lot. I have friends who, in other communities, that have stepped up and helped their communities. I think of a mentor from Strong, Zola Brown, helping out in the city. Some women to Mom Meeks, who I've known for years, told his story in my classroom this year about how he didn't think about how he was going to run, but he decided to, so he did. Excuse me. So after that, I got to thinking, and I felt this would be the right thing to do. So I hope that I can bring my professionalism to the table. I hope it's something that the board can lean on, and it's something that I hope people elect me for on May 17th. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Eleanor.
Again, thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you for hanging in there. And I am the last thing standing between you and the end of this evening. I will be brief, but I chose to run 2 years ago because I saw on the board at that time that there were very few people who were parents who had children in school. I am glad and grateful to see that everyone up here today still has children in the school district, and we all actually have graduating seniors, which is wonderful, in the class of 2022. But the last 2 years have reminded me a lot about what's most important in my life, which is to, as a working parent, find the time to give back to the community and the community that raised me and developed my love of music. As a part of this, I managed to reconnect with the daughter of my old math teacher, Mr. Gonzalez, who encouraged me as a woman to pursue math, which I did for a while in college along with music. And it is what I do. I volunteer at FoodLink to help with food insecurity as that became so much worse over the past couple of years. But also, even as PTSA president this year, helping and getting out of the way sometimes of building chairs, but helping advocate and work with them as they have brought everything back to in-person. Bring back the traditions, bring back the events, and I want to continue to enhance that, to serve on the Board of Education, to further help grow and develop this community, or just be a part of it and dedicate my time to Brighton. And that's all. This is the only office that I ever wish to have, and I wish to have it and then pass this along to other people, as I believe perspectives should change and should develop and move along as our children move along. And this is my opportunity and chance to be a part of this for the next 3 years. So If you do want to reach out to me, I am also available online on Facebook. I have a website, eleanor.io. Just flip the last 2 letters of my last name, and that's all it is. But anyway, thank you so much for coming tonight, and thank you again to Sangeeta and Sherry for your time tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. This concludes my portion of the candidate night, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sangeeta and the Brighton PTSA for closing remarks.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank the candidates for taking the time out tonight to be here and allowing the community this opportunity to get to know you. I think it was very important and very valuable. So I appreciate your time. I'd like to thank the audience for being here, both at home and the audience that's here live. Thank you to all of you that sent in questions. Hopefully you got the answers to some of your questions that you sent in. I'd also like to take a quick moment to thank our tech crew for being here tonight and live streaming us. It's a nice advantage that we have. And to Dan Goldman for helping PTSA get this event organized for the evening. And especially to Sherry Johnson for taking the time out to be here this evening to moderate this event. And finally, I'm just going to say May 17th, next Tuesday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., Central Office Building. Please come out and vote. Just can't reiterate that, how important it is to get everybody out here to vote. So again, May 17th, Central Office Building, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Thank you.
Food trucks.
No.